I want to talk about Paul and with regards to the drink offering. We can read in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. It says, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the course, I have kept the faith. In the future there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day, and not only me, but also those who have loved his appearing." Then we go to Philippians 2:17. It says, "But even if I am being poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrifice and service of your faith, I rejoice and share my joy with you. You too, I urge you, rejoice in the same way and share your joy with me." So we see that concept of a drink offering, and the drink offering was about in the sacrificial system. It was part of the offerings. There was a drink offering with all of them. And one of the things before I go to the Torah about this is 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9 says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession." Which talks about us being part of a priesthood. Unless I'm misinterpreting it, but because he's talking about things in verse 8, which is a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. For they stumbled because they are disobedient to the word, and to this they were also appointed, which are obedience to the word. But it's talking about Christ, about the precious cornerstone. You see in verse 6, verse 7, about the stone that the builders rejected became the chief cornerstone. That's in verse 7. And, Paul talks about us being living stones, but he also talks about us being living sacrifices. But I want to go to Numbers 15, where it talks about some drink offerings. In 15, and you want to read 1 through about 13, but I don't know that I'll read all of them, because I just want to get the thing about drink offerings. In your appointed, "The one who presents his offering shall present to the Lord a grain offering of 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/4 a hin of oil." And oil and one thing I'll comment here is about a grain offering, and it may or may not apply, but you have the parable of the wheat and the tares. But what happens? You crush wheat, you add oil to it, you bake it, and it becomes bread. You crush the wheat and be a threshing, the threshing that happens, the tribulation, and we become wheat. We become flour. It becomes flour, and then you add the oil, which oil is always represented the Holy Spirit in the offerings, from my understanding. And olive oil that was crushed, beaten olives. In some areas it mentions about beaten olives. But you mix the oil and the wheat together, and you bake it, and it becomes bread. With the Holy Spirit, we become, in some ways, a bread of life to others. as we go through tribulations and struggles and face trials, but we persevere through those things by the Holy Spirit, by the Ruach, in some ways we become bread and a letter that the only letter some people will read. But let's go on here. And you shall prepare wine for a drink offering, 1/4 of a hin with a burnt offering, or for a sacrifice, for each lamb. Or for a ram you shall prepare a grain offering, 2/10 of an ephah, fine flour mixed with 1/3 of a hin of oil. And for a drink offering you shall offer 1/3 of a hin of wine as a soothing aroma to the Lord. When you prepare a bull as a burnt offering on a sacrifice to fulfill a special vow or peace offering to the Lord, then you shall offer with the bull a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah or fine flour mixed with 1/2 hin of oil. And you shall offer as the drink offering 1/2 hin of wine as the offering by fire, as a soothing aroma to the Lord. And so the question is, do we become a drink offering? Do we become a living sacrifice? And through that do people see us? Like it says, through your good works, people will see your good works and glorify God. But how do they do that? How do they do that? How do they start glorifying God and living the way that they should be living and accepting Yeshua as their sacrifice? Then they start glorifying God. And how does that happen? And you can read in John 17. You read over here in John 17 about where he says, I have been that they may be of one. While I was with them, I was keeping them in your name. While I was with them, this is verse 12, I was keeping them in your name, which you have given me, and I guarded them, and not one of them perished, but the son of perdition. So the scriptures be fulfilled. But, I have been glorified. He says in verse 6 of chapter 17 of John, it says, I have manifested your name to the men whom you have given me out of the world. And it talks about, I have glorified you. At one point it talks about, I have glorified you. But it says in verse 17, sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. His Torah is truth. His Torah is all about love. That they also be sanctified in truth. For their sakes I sanctify myself, that they themselves. But how did Christ glorify God on earth? I have accomplished the work you've given me to do. Father, glorify me together. But he had glorified, if you read throughout this, he says that I have glorified you. I've given them your word. I've shown you. Just like his disciples said, how have we do see the Lord? And he says, have you been with me all this time? And do you not know me? He kept the Torah. That he was revealing the Father by keeping the Torah. And he became a sin sacrifice for us. He took our place. So, and how do we do that? In some ways, we can give up our lives to help others, and that's kind of what Paul did with his thing. And I have to ask the question, do we become a sacrifice? A living sacrifice in the way we do things here? Perhaps. I think it's possible. And you can read in Leviticus, when you read about the sacrifices, you read about the drink offering. Leviticus 6, verse 21, it says, it shall be prepared with oil on a griddle. Why a griddle? And it talks about, there's a point where I think it talks about unleavened bread and some of the stuff. You have to read all this stuff and kind of look at it. Leviticus 6, verse 27 is one of the reasons why we have to come to Messiah. How we are cleansed by Messiah. Because it says, anyone who touches its flesh, talking about the sacrifice, because verse 26 says, the priest who offers it for sin shall eat it. It shall be eaten in a holy place, in the court of the tent of meeting. Anyone who touches its flesh will become consecrated. And when any of its blood splashes on a garment, in a holy place, wash what was splashed on. We talk about anyone who touches it. Well, that's why when people touched Yeshua, they were healed. Do we do that in some ways for people? Do we become that living sacrifice? Do our lives portray that? Are we a drink offering? Is my question. Or how does that work? How do we become a drink offering to Lord? How do we become a soothing aroma as living sacrifices through what we do? Paul talks about us being living sacrifices and living stones. This is just hopefully some kind of an idea of how the richness that you can find in the Torah, in all the sacrificial system, and the tabernacle, and the temple, and how the temple and tabernacle were about Yahweh dwelling with us, dwelling with the Israelites back then. And we are a temple of the Holy Spirit. Well, what resides in us? His Holy Spirit resides in us. Comes and lives in us and circumcises our heart and cleanses us. That changes our walk and are we glorifying Yahweh by the things that we do and reaching people and our walk. That's why walk is so important. And to glorify His name by how we live, how we worship Him in our lifestyle. Shalom, shalom.